Fab Four, Beatlemania, arguably one of the most influential music acts that have ever existed. Since the British invasion of the U.S. on February 7, 1964, America was hooked, especially the throngs of young girls that screamed until they passed out. Despite the incredible success they enjoyed decades ago, the question remains, how influential do the Beatles continue to be in recent generations? It'd be difficult to ignore a band that is still very much a part of modern times. Last month, the entire Beatles catalog was finally released for sale on iTunes. In just 10 days of release, over 2 million songs were purchased. Last year, EA Games released Beatles Rock Band, allowing the young and the young at heart to become their idols for a few hours at a time. The game sold incredibly well, selling out a fourth of its inventory in the first week of its release. In 2000, over 40 years after they made landfall in the United States, the Beatles had the best-selling album of the year with their Number Ones compilation. Their sales beat out NSYNC and were second in total sales, just behind Eminem. And the Fab Four are one of the best-selling bands of all time, literally. Their albums have gone platinum a record 19 times. What is it exactly that makes the Beatles so timeless? According to Zimbio.com, younger generations are exposed to the band by their parents, by time in college, and living in a small-town atmosphere of the musically inclined. Their impact today is in the sound of the guitar lick, the harmonies, the song structure, and the lyrics. In 2003, an article by The Independent, a British newspaper, explained that a third of all Beatles records are being bought by people under the age of 24, despite the fact that the group split up before these people were even born. This success came with the release of their greatest hits album, which helped expose a whole new generation to the Beatles. Last week, on December 8th, was the 30th anniversary of John Lennon's death. Yet still, the Dakota, where John and Yoko once lived, is still flooded with flowers and candles each year on that date. The phrase "Strawberry Fields Forever" was a trending topic throughout that day on Twitter. The term is likely to have been used as a memoriam for John because of the section of Central Park in New York City that is dedicated to his memory. All of this goes to show you how influential the Beatles are still today to this generation and the generations that are to come. We spoke with 3 people to see how it is that even in 2010 the Beatles continue to be one of their favorite bands.
When I was a little kid, my mom would play Beatles records when she was doing housework. So she would, turn it up loud so you could hear it over the vacuum because it was real upbeat and happy. And that's how I remember, hearing those songs at first because it got her energized and motivated. So, we would hear Christmas songs and hymns and the Beatles in our house when I was a kid, and that's what music was when I was a little guy.
Well, I have to say it was my parents who introduced me to the Beatles, and specifically we listened to a lot of their music when we were on road trips, so we'd always have Beatles on tape, and wherever we went, they'd be in rotation for what we would listen to.
It really wasn't my parents. It was mostly, I'd heard some of their more popular stuff, like growing up. It's kind of hard not to have heard them. And then it was really the Beatles Rock Band that really got me into them and checking out more of their unknown stuff and really starting listening to them.
So I guess the songs that I first learned were the ones that my folks liked. So those were Here Comes the Sun and Penny Lane and, the really, really happy, simple, fast ones. But, over the years, I really like, a lot of their later, more psychedelic, darker stuff. And not that it ever was really dark, but more complex stuff. So they're kind of deep if you, get back into the, the deeper parts of the catalog.
Part of the cool thing about the Beatles is the more you listen to their albums, or the more you just find different songs, you end up finding some that you like, that kind of fit what you're going through. And then sometimes stuff that grabs you at first because it's a catchy tune or something like that don't end up being your favorite in the long run.
Mm-hmm. With almost every band, when you first start to get into them, like their most popular stuff, and then as you start to listen to them more, you get into their like deeper cuts and stuff like that.
Being kind of young in the '60s, it was a big band, and they I think they got caught up in the Beatlemania just as like all their peers did, and actually the fact that they not only that, but they stuck with them too. Like they listened to them when they were young, but obviously they still listen to them now, so they've just been a part of their lives for a long time as well.
Mm-hmm. They definitely liked them, but I think they were a little bit young for. Like my dad was born in '59 and my mom in '63, so I think that's a little young for like Beatlemania. But they definitely know their stuff, and they just didn't play it too much like when I was growing up.
So my mom was. So I guess there were two types of girls. There was Beatles girls and there were Stones girls. Where my mom grew up in Brooklyn, and she always felt like the girls that liked the Rolling Stones were like, the bad kids, and she always liked the Beatles. And her brother was in a cover band called the Weedlebigs. There's a Beatles cover band, and the Weedlebigs came from Beatles wigs. They just flipped the words. So her brother was always into them, and they would practice in the garage, so she always would hear the cover songs like that, and she liked Paul. And like her next door neighbor liked John.
These are great. I mean, there's so many wonderful songs. I know for me and my wife, actually, we did All You Need Is Love was our wedding song. Which we danced to ridiculously, but yeah, I think they're just such great songs that people connect to emotionally.
They have songs like about so many different things, like happy songs, sad songs, that like you can really easily relate to a lot of their songs, no matter what you're going through.
So I know in our case, my folks, my and my wife's case. Our folks, or my folks, when they got married, their song was Here, There, and Everywhere. It was like their wedding song. And I would imagine that there were lots of people that used Beatles songs as their wedding song. So when we got married, we played that song just as one of the songs during the wedding so they could dance. And I think that's the kind of thing that, once you have a song like signify a large moment like that, it gets passed on from generation to generation.
Beatles songs, like anyone can like them. They're so many different genres that you're bound to like some of them. And also, I think with like the Beatles, they broke up sort of only really 7 years making albums. So a lot of it is like what if they hadn't broken up and how much music could they have made. Whereas with the Rolling Stones, it's like we know what happened, we saw it, like they're still around. So I think like the mysteriousness and intrigue of like what could have happened with the Beatles adds to their popularity.
A lot of it I think has to do with the Stones were really playing on a blues tradition that was really rich and was great, but they weren't really innovating a lot. Whereas the Beatles invented pop music, at that point, and pop music is still huge. And the things that the Beatles were doing are still fresh, in a lot of ways.
There's something about the Beatles songs that are just kind of timeless. They reach out to a wider variety of listeners, where the Rolling Stones, for example, I mean, if you don't like rock and roll, you're probably not going to like the Rolling Stones, or maybe a little bit of blues, you're not going to like the Rolling Stones. Or the Beatles have so many different types of genres. They're also pretty well marketed.
Yeah, sure. Why not? It's like you don't want to force it on them because they might like rebel and hate them. But yeah, why not?
Sure, yeah. So I have my Beatles record collection that I don't really collect for myself as much as I want to be able to do the same stuff my folks did, which is like put these on when my kids are 3 or whatever, and I can vacuum with them on, right? It's not that Lionel sounds great as much as it's just like it's where I come from, and I want to give them that same thing.
Yeah, but I have one little son, and yeah, we've already listened to some Beatles songs and danced around the living room to some Beatles songs, and I hope he enjoys them as much as I did, because they're just a fun listen.
What's your favorite kind of Beatles?
Hello.
The dung beetle?
Yeah.
What kind of beetle do you like?
Doinga.
Doinga doinga.
Can you show us what a dung beetle does?
Like this.
Dung beetle!
Doinga. Doinga.
Yeah. Can you tell us how you felt when Yoko Ono broke the Beatles up? What did it make you want to do? Do a poopy face?